Hello, Brobs. We're back with more Napoleon. Bisexual Emperor, Major General Frank Richardson, MD. We will conclude chapter 11. I believe we are right here at the man of your lost courage in the 18th. All right, there we go. The extraordinary This extraordinary remark may indicate that Marat was impelled by something more than the promptings of his wife's jealous hostility to her brother. His knowledge of his value to Napoleon as a soldier made him the more determined not to be just another cipher married to a Bonaparte, like Bacciochi and Borghese. He hated to feel that he was a king only as Napoleon's brother-in-law. His military career had advanced along with Napoleon's. What one general could do, another could at least attempt. In a remarkable outburst to the assembled generals at his headquarters at Posen during the retreat from Moscow, he had said that he could no longer serve under a madman, and went on to add that if he had accepted certain advances made by the English, he would have himself been a monarch like the Emperor of Austria or King of Prussia. He had always been a bit unbalanced, too excitable, lacking self-control, but it is interesting to speculate what might have been the results of his impact on the field of Waterloo had Napoleon been able to overcome his distrust as he overcame his distrust of Ney, or is it Nye? Those repeated cavalry charges could hardly have been pressed with more resolution, but they could have been more intelligently directed. On his throne, he was an irresolute waverer, most unlike the dashing cavalry leader, who knew just when and where to strike. Poor Marat, in many ways a likable man, made one last attempt after Napoleon's fall to emulate the master. He tried to stage his own return to his kingdom, but to his people he could never mean what Napoleon, and even Marat himself, had meant to the French. So they executed him after only 5 of his attempted 100 days. He made a typically flamboyant end, eyes unbandaged, commanding the firing squad. Soldiers, aim at my heart, but spare the face. The impact of Napoleon's family on his public life is nearly summed up in the title of Mr. R.F. Delderfield's book about the brother and sisters, The Golden Millstones. Napoleon would have been better served if he had made kings out of some of his marshals, and there were better men for the job than Marat if Napoleon could have overcome his dislike and fear of strong and popular generals. Napoleon's brothers shared the same genetic inheritance and family background. Apart from the differing influences imposed on each child by its place in the family, it was a family background such as Freud believed is apt to make homosexual sons, and it seems to have had that effect on Napoleon and Louis. It would be unprofitable to speculate further about possible effects of shared family influences. Education for life in a civilized community cannot be entirely free from frustrations. Every child must have some of its desires thwarted. So traumatic experiences are the common lot. How we deal with these determines the kind of person we become. Men like Napoleon can seize destiny by the throat, as Beethoven put it. Napoleon's brothers and sisters, eager to share his destiny, were united in only one aspect of it: their campaign to get rid of Josephine. In this, they had at least half-hearted support from Napoleon, who swithered irresolutely between his need for an heir and his dependence on Josephine. He told his Minister of State, Count Champagny, that if he married again for reasons of state, he would only be marrying a womb, for Josephine was his choice for a life companion. In the hounding of Josephine, and characteristically, it was the bitch pack which took the lead. The hell is that? Caroline was well to the fore. It was she who plotted the experimental liaison with Eleanor Denuel to persuade Napoleon that he was capable of fatherhood. Napoleon's mother had disapproved of Josephine, even hated her for the things she said about Napoleon's potency, but she was not the woman to gloat over her final defeat. She even showed sympathy, and so did the kindly Pauline, who knew what Josephine meant to Napoleon. She disapproved of his second marriage and showed her feelings in a rude gesture when Marie Louise made her first state appearance in Brussels. For this, she was rebuked by Napoleon and banished from court. The possibility the possibility that one or more of Napoleon's sisters may have played an active part in his sexual life has been excessively debated. Madame de Remusat wrote that Josephine believed that Napoleon had seduced his sisters one after the other. Rumors spread from France through Europe that he had committed incest with at least two of them, Pauline and Caroline, and this was openly alleged in one of those anonymous contemporary sources drawn upon by scurrilous pamphleteers like Louis Goldsmith to denigrate the Bonapartes. This pamphlet, A Secret History of the Cabinet of Bonaparte, claimed that Pauline openly boasted of her illicit liaison. On one occasion, it seems that she said, "I am on excellent terms with my brother. I have slept with him twice." Before going to join Napoleon in Elba, she is said to have hinted that she could give him more than sisterly comfort. Oh my God. Fauch's Napoleon's Minister of Police, Fauch, Napoleon's Minister of Police, assiduously spread the scandal of Pauline's incestuous relations with Napoleon, but it was Fauch's job to know everything about everybody and his hobby to discover and to believe everything discreditable. Sir Walter Scott, though hostile to Napoleon, would have none of these rumors. He wrote, "We reject without weighing it an accusation too hideous even to be mentioned, and which ought never to be breathed without the clearest proofs in support of it." Napoleon was far from indignant about similar rumors that he was the incestuous father of Hortense's son. Incest was said to be regarded by Corsicans in his day as not at all disgraceful or repugnant, but he had great regard for the reputation of his own family, and this scandal was probably just one of the unpleasant inventions of hostile propagandists, which anti-Bonapartist writers have never allowed to be forgotten. Hostility to the family was kept alive by the unpopularity of Napoleon III, a pale shadow who tried most ineffectively to revive the glories of the Napoleonic era, and by the remarkable tendency of the descendants of Madame Mare's fantastic brood to throw up a series of freaks, frauds, and perverts. A granddaughter of Lucien, Studholmina, Countess of Solms, who specialized in amorous involvements, as did her mother Letitia, was convinced of homosexual perversion, was convicted of homosexual perversion in 1892. She told a friend that she was bisexual, adding that it was hereditary, as her aunts Elisa, Caroline, and Pauline were similarly constituted. But however constituted Napoleon's sisters may have been, it is rather on account of his own character that the allegations of incest seem unconvincing. There was no love lost between Napoleon and Caroline even before she betrayed him. Pauline, for all her love and admiration of her wonderful brother, was quite capable of opposing, criticizing, and bantering him. I cannot imagine the weakly sexed Napoleon, plagued as he was by fears of impotence, risking failure and derision in a field about which he was so very sensitive, by trying conclusions with these strongly sexed sisters. If Napoleon did sleep with his sisters, he did not talk about it, as did Lord Byron, who wrecked the happiness of his half-sister Augusta, not so much by committing incest, what the fuck, as by inability to keep his mouth shut. "Hey, I banged my sister, bruv." Unfortunately, as we have already seen, Napoleon was less discreet about the rumors that he was the father of his stepdaughter's first son. Poor Hortense was no Corsican. And her distress when she heard of the scandal from Napoleon himself, her disgust at his complacency that rumors should credit him with being a father, and her horror that she could be thought capable of such conduct, have the ring of genuine innocence. Constant, who liked to think that he knew all about his master's amours, poured scorn on the story and assured us that Napoleon never for one moment cherished the base desires attributed to him by his detractors. If we can believe Madame de Remusat, Napoleon, rather than loving Hortense, held her in reverence, which makes it easier to accept Constance's assurance, rather than to believe Napoleon capable of venting base desires on a young girl under his special protection, for which it would be hard to forgive him. Unlike some of the Bonapartes, Eugene and Hortense Beauharnais repaid all that Napoleon did for them with lifelong loyalty, and he seems to have had very kindly, albeit typically selfish feelings for them. He was aghast when, after he divorced Josephine, Hortense told him that she and her brother would leave France with their mother. Her supremely self-centered stepfather exclaimed, "What? You are never going to desert me?" It never occurred to him that the wife he had discarded would not still be around to entertain and comfort him, with her children in attendance on their imperial protector. And that, of course, is how it all turned out. Eugene stayed on as Viceroy of Italy, a position he would hardly have won had he not been the emperor's stepson. But as the son of an able young general and having grown up under Napoleon's military wing, he could hardly fail to become a fine soldier. In 1812, towards the end of the soul-destroying retreat from Moscow, after Murat's defection, Eugene commanded the main body of the army and rose to the challenge resolutely. Unselfish, generous, and genuinely attached to his stepfather, Eugene was a thoroughly delightful man against whom no word of reproach, no hint of anything abnormal or dishonorable has ever been heard. Well, it has to be admitted that there was talk of a possible mistress named Seraphine, but Eugene deserves most of the credit for making a supremely happy marriage out of one of Napoleon's typical meddlesome marriage plots, which had involved taking Eugene's bride, Princess Amalie Augusta of Bavaria, always called Auguste, away from the crown prince of Baden, to whom she had been promised. As a consolation prize, Napoleon awarded him Stephanie de Beauharnais, whom he had himself tried to seduce. Stephanie, who had been scolded by Josephine for permitting Napoleon's advances, was disgusted at being used as a pawn in these schemes. I gotta sneeze. Lord, these dreaded sneezes. Next time I'm just gonna sneeze without posing the camera. Napoleon's advances was disgusted at being used as a pawn in these schemes and refused to consummate her marriage and spent her wedding night with a girlfriend. Princess Auguste had also been violently opposed to this arranged marriage, and Prince Eugene gallantly offered her the chance of backing out, volunteering to take all the blame on himself. But his charm and gentle courtesy soon made the political marriage a love match, which lasted for life. Hortense's fate was very different, although Napoleon obviously acted with the best of intentions towards her. Two generals to whom he would have liked to marry her were friends of whom he had the highest opinion. One was Duroc, whom Constant and de Bourrienne believed she had loved sincerely, but he refused to marry her. The other, a member of the old nobility, was General de Say de Vergou, who was killed at Marengo. In giving Hortense in marriage to his brother Louis, Napoleon must have been hoping to benefit two people of whom he was fond, and could hardly have foreseen that he was condemning Hortense to a life of misery. Neither of them loved the other. Louis loved Emily de Beauharnais, whom Napoleon gave to Count Antoine de la Valette. Emily at least came well out of the transactions, for she did not love Louis, who by then had become the least attractive of the Bonapartes, and was said to have been infected with syphilis. Napoleon could not have known this, nor did he know that Lucien had convinced Louis that Hortense had become Napoleon's mistress. Poor Louis was thus prepared to believe that his omnipotent brother was the father of the first son of his marriage. whom Napoleon adopted as his heir. Little wonder that Hortense's querulous self-pity and lugubrious memoirs record an unhappy life. It should be unfair to blame Napoleon for all her troubles. She seems to have been fated to be involved in scandal. Her own father denied that she was his child. It was generally supposed that her husband, Louis Bonaparte, was not the father of her second son, later to be Napoleon III. Of the candidates for that honor, the most widely favored was a Dutch admiral named Verhuell. After her wretched marriage ended in separation in 1812, she had a romance with young Charles de Flahaut, for whose affections Caroline Bonaparte was at one time a rival. Hortense liked to call her affair with de Flahaut, a morganatic marriage, as it was generally accepted as such, so much so that the son she bore to de Flahaut was created Duc de Morny and rode beside his half-brother Napoleon III at the beginning of the Second Empire, during which he became a leading statesman. Hortense's love and loyalty to Napoleon lightened a little the story of her sad life. After his final abdication, she welcomed and comforted him at Malmaison, scorning suggestions that she would thus forfeit the favor of the Bourbons and of the Tsar Alexander, who had been a good friend to her mother. She wrote, "I would never have abandoned the man whom I called my father. The hour of his misfortune was the hour for me to manifest my gratitude to him." Eugene's unselfish loyalty to Napoleon is particularly praiseworthy, for he had much to lose. It would have been in his best interest to join the Sixth Coalition against Napoleon in 1813 and 1814, but when everyone was deserting France, Eugene remained constant. He had been secretly offered the crown of Sweden before Bernadotte was approached. Now he could have had the kingdom of Italy if he had abandoned Napoleon. He felt that his children had a right to royal status, for they were a king's grandchildren, but even for their sake he would not desert France, as the upstart Murat had done. He broke off diplomatic relations with his father-in-law, the King of Bavaria, and wrote to his wife, "I'll never be king at that price." Even Napoleon's enemies have always recognized his formidable power of charming human hearts. He hardly needed to exert this magnetism in the case of his stepchildren. Josephine, who adored them, cannot ever have spoken ill of their own father, for they always spoke of him with affection and pride. And with the same generosity, she may have kept from her children most of what she knew of the evil side of her second husband. But there must have been something quite exceptional about this motherfucking remarkable man to create such indissoluble bonds between him and the children of a woman whom he had treated as so much less kindly than he probably wished to do. I botched that, but whatever. What do we got? 5 pages left. That's the end of chapter 11. Put this in there. No, we got about 10 pages. About 10 pages left, bruv. That's all. Goodbye. Goodbye.